So you agreed to play your very first game of Dungeons & Dragons, and now it's a couple hours before the game, and you need a quick explanation of the rules and how the game works. Good news, this video is for you. I'm going to show you the basic rules of Dungeons & Dragons. So I'm going to assume that you've already made a character, and if you haven't, then I'm just going to link some really cool stuff to do it super quick in the description below. But here is a super simple explanation for how Dungeons & Dragons works. First, you make a character. More info on that below. Your friends also make characters. Everyone brings their characters to the game. Hopefully everyone brings snacks. Snacks are super important. Do not forget snacks. Everyone gathers around a table, including the DM. That's the Dungeon Master, or the GM. That's the Game Master, depending on what they like to be called. The Dungeon Master is the person who runs the game. They're in charge of the rules. And they're also the narrator. They describe the scene and ask what your character wants to do. They also roleplay all the other characters you encounter and the monsters that you fight. Be nice to your DM. Give them some snacks. Okay, so once the game gets started, it's helpful to think of D&D as having two basically main parts. Number one is free play. There's no set turn order, and the players are free to act when and how they choose. And number two, there is a turn order. That's during combat. We'll get to that, don't worry. So in number one, when there's no set turn order and the players are free to act how and when they choose, D&D works like this. The DM describes the setting. The DM might say something like, "You and your compatriots enter a tavern. It's evening. The rain pouring outside. The fire roars in the fireplace. A bartender pours a mug of ale. And in the back corner, someone in a black cloak is eating potato soup. What would you like to do?" In this scenario, you, the player, have a couple of options. You can interact with the other characters in the world. You can explore the environment. And remember, there's no turn order, so feel free to just jump in when the spirit moves you. Let's say you want to explore your environment. As a player, you would say, I want to order a beer at the bar, and then I want to look around the room and see if there are any traps here, because that guy eating the potato soup looks like super duper sus. Your DM would let you order the beer at the bar, as long as you had money enough to do that. Check your inventory. Your DM might also not rake you over the coals for the beer. Hey DMs, first-time players, don't rake them over the coals for the beer. But to check for traps, you'd have to roll a 20-sided die to see if you actually succeeded in finding any traps. Okay. Record scratch. I have to roll a what? So this is a super important part of Dungeons & Dragons. Every time your character does something that requires a skill, you have to roll a 20-sided die. What you roll will determine whether you succeed or fail. This is the base mechanic of the entire game. There are a bunch of different skills and abilities that your character has. Intelligence, athletics, perception, dexterity, nature, performance. When you made your character, you made certain decisions. You put higher numbers in certain abilities and lower numbers in other abilities. Those determine how good you are at certain things and how maybe not so good you are at other things. In Dungeons & Dragons, those equate to a numerical bonus. So when you roll a 20-sided die, you look for the requisite skill that the DM is going to tell you, and then you just see a little number there that says either plus or minus a number. You add or subtract that number to whatever you roll. So when you climb a wall, or you tell a lie through your teeth, or you check for traps, your DM will ask you to roll dice. And the number on that die, plus whatever bonus you may have, is going to determine whether you succeed or fail. That number needs to either beat a number that is pre-written in the adventure that the Dungeon Master has, or with a number that the Dungeon Master just came up with in their head that is a good numerical value to determine whether the thing is easy, medium, hard, very hard, or impossible. In Dungeons & Dragons, that number is called the difficulty class, or DC. So that's something you might hear tonight. If the number you roll on the die, plus whatever bonus you have, is equal to or higher than the difficulty class, or DC, you succeed. If the number you roll is lower than the DC or difficulty class, you fail. And now here's how it plays out in the game. You're in the tavern, you want to check for traps. DM, I want to quietly search the room and check to see if there are any traps. Your DM might say, okay, make a stealth check and an investigation check. You roll the d20. Secretly, without telling you, the DM sets the difficulty class for these tasks. A DC of 10 for stealth, a DC of 15 for investigation. Let's say you roll for stealth, and you get a 3. For investigation, you roll a 19, and you add your sweet, sweet bonus of plus 5. You wind up with a 24. Obviously, you fail your stealth check by a bunch, but you succeeded at your investigation roll big time. Remember, the DC of your task was a 15, and you got a 24. What? Your DM takes these rolls and says, you walk around the room, knocking into chairs, spilling your mug of beer, and muttering traps, traps, traps to yourself under your breath and generally making a commotion. Your other party members are like, oh my god, not with the traps again. Everyone in the tavern notices you. But you investigate thoroughly, and you are 100% sure there are no traps in this tavern. You see what happened there? I mean, this is the game. You take numerical scores, and you create a story. And this is where the good stuff happens. You'd say, DM, I want to go talk to the guy eating soup. and I say, "That soup looks good. Mind if I have some?" Now the DM, role-playing the character eating soup, asks you to roll a persuasion check. You roll the 20-sided die, and you get a 1. You add your persuasion bonus of 2, ending up with a 3. Oh no. You stress eat some snacks. Based on this roll, the DM says, the person eating soup stares at you. They respond, "Friend, I don't share my soup with anyone. I like peace and quiet when I'm sipping this here liquid potato. And your little charade looking for traps pissed me off. Finally, and most importantly, I have been sent here to kill you." The man eating soup, shing, pulls his sword out from underneath his cloak and points it at you. He then with his other hand rips off his human face, revealing that he was a robot construct the entire time with red glowing laser eyes pointed directly at you. "Let's dance, friend." So now we arrive at combat. And if you'll remember, this is the second type of gameplay in D&D. It's the one with turns. So you're no longer free to just walk around drinking a beer, knocking over tables, getting people eating potato soup pissed at you. This is when things get a little more rules-based. Combat works like this. All the players roll a 20-sided die. Whoever rolls the highest goes first. The rest of the players follow in descending order of their rolls. This includes the characters you're fighting. The DM rolls for them. This is called rolling for initiative, and the order is called initiative order. It's just another way of saying who goes when. Okay, so you ever see Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon? You know how in the middle of the fight everything goes into slow motion? And the camera kind of like whooshes around the actors mid-jump. That's the way I like to think about combat in D&D. It's like time slows down for a minute, which is also kind of what happens when someone's adrenaline goes up. You roll initiative, you figure out where you go in the turn order, and then combat is broken down into rounds, and each round is broken up into each character's turn. It's helpful to think of every round lasting for 6 seconds. And during that 6 seconds, every character has the ability to do as much as they can within that 6 seconds. And the turn order is kind of like who's reacting a millisecond before the other person. But during that round of combat, everyone's experiencing the same 6 seconds of slow motion. What can you do on your turn? Okay, there's a ton of things that you can do, and there's lots of helpful lists to let you know all the various things that you can do on your turn, but there's a very simple way of thinking about this that I'd recommend you bring into your game tonight. Basically, you can do one thing and you can move. The thing that you do is called your action. On your character sheet, you're going to see your abilities, your skills, your spells, and in the description of each of those, it will say right there whether it takes an action or not. In some special cases, you'll be able to also use a bonus action. Don't worry too much about that, but if you do have the ability to use a bonus action, it'll say so right in your character sheet under one of your abilities. And you can also move. The amount you move is determined by your movement speed, which is also on your character sheet. There are other things that you can do on your turn along with those things, which fall pretty much under the common sense rule. You can shout something out. You can open an unlocked door. You can knock all of the mugs of ale off the table and draw your sword. But in the beginning, it's just good to think about what is it that I could do in 6 seconds. And I would say, try not to even worry too much about the rules. Think about what your character would want to do in 6 seconds, describe it dramatically, and the DM will help you learn how to roll and what to roll for. But let's say you do use your action to do one of the most common things in Dungeons & Dragons when combat erupts. You attack. When you attack an enemy, you're going to make 2 rolls. One to see if your attack hits them, and the other to see how much damage you do to them. Every character in the game has an armor class, or AC. It's on your character sheet. Every character has a certain number of hit points. When your enemy gets to 0 hit points, guess what? They're dead. So let's say that you attack the soup robot from the tavern and they have an armor class or AC of 16 and 20 hit points. Let's say your initiative roll was high and higher than the soup robot. You get to attack first, but you roll and your attack is lower than 16. That means your attack misses and you don't get to roll damage. I'm so sorry. The soup robot evades your swing as it whooshes over its head. You would then get a chance to move if you so chose, and it would be the next person in the initiative order's turn. But if your first attack roll was a 16 or higher, then you get to do that second roll and see how much damage you inflicted on them. Rock and roll. You check your character sheet and you see that the type of sword that you had is a rapier, which uses a 8-sided die for its damage. You roll it, you do 6 points of damage, and the soup robot loses 6 of its hit points. That means that the soup robot now has 14 hit points as opposed to 20. And when that 14 gets down to 0, probably after many other characters' turns, guess what? The soup robot's head explodes and you defeat them. They're on the highway to the 9 hells. That's it. That's all you need. I mean, there's so much more to D&D that I didn't cover here, but hopefully this will be enough to get you through your first session with the help of a good dungeon master. To review, there are 2 types of gameplay. one where there's no turn order and you're walking around, exploring your environment, talking to folks, figuring things out, making skill checks. And the second type of gameplay is where there's a turn order, and that means that you're in combat. Things slow down. What can you do in 6 seconds? You get your movement, your action, maybe a bonus action, saying something, you're making attacks, and if those attacks succeed, you're rolling damage. Look, D&D has a lot of rules, but for the most part, you don't need to worry about them. Your Dungeon Master friend does. I didn't cover a lot of them here, but I don't need to. No matter what, it's going to take you a little bit of time to get a feel for this game. That's true of any game. The most important thing to remember is to have fun. I'm not joking. If you're having fun, you're doing it right. I can almost guarantee you that the Dungeon Master is going to be psyched to help you walk through the rules. Remember that this is a role-playing game. Just go in and make some fun, cool choices. Explore this fantastical world that the DM has set out for you. Defend what you've set out to defend. Investigate what you've set out to investigate. Try to find the treasure. See what happens when you talk to the person that the DM just mentions offhand. This isn't a video game. It's an experience that is unique unto itself. You and your friends are going to be sitting around a table or sitting in front of a computer screen looking at each other's little squares, and you're going to have an experience that, if this is your first time, you've never had anything like this. If you found this video helpful, please be sure to subscribe to this channel. We're going to be making more content to help people get into this game that we love so much. My name is Joby. I'm the DM for The Familiars. If you want to get a good sense of what D&D looks like to play, you can check out our stream on demand right here on our YouTube channel. If you did find this video helpful and you visit our YouTube channel a lot, think about heading over to our Patreon and dropping us a couple bucks every month. It helps us make more content for you and to help you have more fun in your TTRPG role-playing games. But regardless, my intent is all for your delight. I hope you have a great time tonight. See you soon.